international aspects of the same, especially from the SADC as well as from the wider Eastern Africa, because those are also issues that are relevant here. Now, before we start, I would very quickly run around the introduction for the benefit of those who may not know our panelists, so that once we start the business of the afternoon, we go straight into that. And I will start introducing myself. So my good names are Charles Sokile. I head also policy management in Tanzania as a country director, and I also work in the space of think tanking as well as educational evidence. Together with me in my immediate left is Madame Pauline, who I'll also ask to introduce herself very briefly, and then we will ask the commissioner also to introduce himself very briefly, and then I'll introduce the subject matter, and we will start the business. Madame Pauline, over to you for introduction.
My name is Paulina Colombo, acting director of the education. It's for the education science.
Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, moderator. My name is Yawenya Tahapwa, Commissioner of Education, Minister of Education, Science and Technology.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, our subject matter is reinventing educational strategy, the role of government in building resilience and preparedness in education. And we will be doing reflections on the most recent pandemic, that is COVID-19. Now, as a way of setting up the pace before we move into the panels, I would just like to let you know that we're going to discuss about 5 major issues. The first thing that we want to focus on is the fact that globally there's been a number of these catastrophic effects that have been brought about by the pandemic, and that until now, in total, 1.5 billion students have been out of school at one time or another. Now, the question is, how are we prepared in terms of resilience and educational protection before COVID-19? What was the levels of preparedness? That's one thing that really like to start and see how far we move. The second issue is that 1 year after the breakout of the pandemic, what is the situation in the respective countries that we are in, and what measures have we put in place in case of any other similar pandemic or in case of any other variant before? The third issue we want to focus on is that in our context, and as we reflect back into the pandemic, what are the levels of disaster preparedness in the government institutions and schools? Are there any lessons learned for future pandemic preparedness? And if so, what are they? And if not, do we still have a room to learn or not? And then we'll also try to discuss and see, in terms of continuity, how much are we sure that learning will continue in case of any eventuality? And how should inclusion be also addressed in the aspect of continuity? What is the situation as far as those who have been excluded by the pandemic? And lastly, we tend to also have a quick look at any other case studies or reports or studies that has walked into this space and that has brought about evidences that can help us as we discuss before. Now again, before I invite my panelists, I wanted to bring home one of the cases that we did in Sierra Leone with Mark McDonald, so Oxford Policy Management and Mark McDonald. So basically, last year after the pandemic, we were engaged by the government in Sierra Leone trying to see what was the situation of the children and whether learning was happening. So we went out to look at 3 things. The first thing was educational resilience and continuity in the near future. The second thing was the cost of learning loss that would have happened in case the pandemic continued, and when indeed it did continue. So what was the total cost of that learning loss and the cost of bringing children back into speed again? And the third thing that we wanted to look on was the extent of the policy responses. How was the government responsive or blind as far as policies were concerned? Now, we found out some interesting aspects and issues which I thought would be just good to set up place here as we compare ourselves with what's happening elsewhere. Out of 2.5 million kids in various levels of primary and secondary school in Sierra Leone, over 90% of them were out of school for more than 6 months. And this was basically a repeat of what had happened in 2014-15 when they also had the Ebola crisis. So what this is telling us is that this crisis is not happening in singular. Maybe next year or the year after, there may be another again. The other thing that was noted out in this study was that the cost of closure in terms of children's well-being was so high, and children, especially girl child, and those from the poorest families were most impacted. In terms of actual numbers, just under 50% of pupils adopted learning programs that were made available by the government. 30% listened to radio programs by the government, but again, there was some huge disparities between boy children and girl children. So for boys, it was only 32%, while for girls, it was 25%. There were also disparities in terms of richness and household economies. So in the richer families, 41% had access to those programs, while in poorer families, only 15% had access to those programs. When we have looked at some score tests, in all grades, boys perform better than girls in English and mathematics. And the conclusion was that actually inequity was compounded, and the inclusion that was once upon a time built into Sierra Leone was very quickly. Now back to our case here, and back to the issues we want to look at. Let us start by checking on what have we learned until now, and how far are we prepared? And I would like to put this question immediately to Madam Pauline, who is actually the custodian of the policy aspect of this in Tanzania. Madam Pauline, over to you.
Through the COVID pandemic, we learned that we must have ways of emergency preparedness any time. And because sometimes you have to close schools, you must have a process of continuity of learning out of school anytime, not necessarily during pandemic. Because even if they continue learning without pandemic, they still benefit. Most of the time when the students are on holidays, they just play. They don't learn anything. But if you have the means of reaching students while at home, they continue learning even when at home. So we have learned that we must have emergency preparedness all the time. Because what is called emergency do not inform you that it is coming. It may come anytime. So we have to prepare ourselves to prepare any kind of emergency anytime.
Thank you, Madam. One aspect very important. Commissioner, are there any specific tangible actions that have been taken so far as the pandemic is concerned, as far as preparedness is concerned, that you know or that you've done?
Thank you very much, moderator. I should start by saying that COVID-19 landed in Tanzania unexpectedly. And it was very, very unexpected. 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 And it was very, if it is customer, you cannot expect something to happen. So, COVID-19 the first time in history, for the first time in history, we experienced that unexpected event, and it caught us unprepared. And from that, we started now addressing that challenge. Fortunately, all people in Tanzania, all non-state actors, all development partners, government departments and districts, united to form a very strong unity to address the challenge at hand. The context created by unity gave us power and courage to handle it very, very realistically. And we handled it by adopting marked action strategy. Every stakeholder in the country was invited to contribute his or her idea, finances, to make sure that we curb that pandemic. And you all know that we closed our schools in March. And on 29 June, we were able to reopen our schools. And we did that after making sure that we had disseminated information about what COVID-19 is all about, how one could avoid contracting COVID-19. And we did that to parents, communities, and to schools, school managers, and students alike. We did that massively to make sure that everybody is aware that COVID-19 is here. And we sent information about how to have wash facilities in each of the schools, maintain social distance, washing hands, and all the precautionary measures were disseminated to people to ensure that they don't contract like this. But then we also prepared a document that would help school leaders provide guidance and counseling services to students after reopening, because we knew that the pandemic had caused distress, had caused psychological problems for students, that there was a need to have an effective guidance in the counseling system. So we prepared a simple guideline document to make sure that each of the schools had at least one or two guidance and counseling officers who would provide guidance to students who might have experienced trauma resulting from the pandemic. So that guideline is disseminated, and we hope that it helps a lot to make sure that our students are receiving proper guidance and counseling services to make them proceed with the studies smoothly. And then another thing which we did was now working together with the government partners and non-state actors to prepare a national education sector preparedness for emergency strategy. That document will be finalized. Now, we learned that schools and the communities alike should be prepared for anything. Floods by a student side, there will be a earthquake that will devastate the school system, and anything will happen. So we have prepared a document entitled National Education Sector Preparedness for Emergency Strategy. That now takes care of everything, anything that you don't anticipate will be taken care of in the future. So what I can say, Mr. Moderator, that I think from now on, we are prepared for any pandemic or any disaster that's going to happen in the future. Schools are aware, communities are aware.
Very much, Commissioner, this is quite enlightening that we have a certain place, there are action points, and also there was an immediate response. But Pauline, what have been the challenges in doing all of this? Is there any challenge that you can envisage or that is holding you back, and how to do this now?
The challenge, the process, we know for sure that we lost some very time. So we might not have We knew for sure across the school that our students have lost some of the learning time. Therefore, we had to find ways of recovering the lost time. So we reviewed the timetable. We didn't want to extend the timetable. We reviewed the timetable. We increased the learning time within a day so that you can cover the lost time. And then by the end, from that June, by the end, by the mid-December 12th, by 18th December, we will be managed to recover the lost time. And by January 2021, we will continue with the normal timetable, and the students are still learning and adhering to COVID-19 strategies.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is now the turn for the floor. If there is any interjection you want to make, if there is any question you want to put over to the panelists, or any addition you want to make, over to you. Raise up your hand high so that I'll be able to see, and then at least give you opportunity. So let's start with the lady right in front of me, and then we come to the other lady, and then to the last lady here. So it's going to be a full integration with ladies. Right. Welcome.
Thank you very much, our dear panelists, for very good discussion. I have a question, just a kind of follow-up on the challenges. I wonder if the ministry managed to do a kind of follow-up study to find out how the parents were coping at home with the children. Because if you already have a strategy, an emergency strategy, it should accommodate various stakeholders who are involved in addressing any difficult situation, because we know children spend a lot of time with parents at home, where the parents also prepared, and how this national emergency strategy or plan accommodate the parents to ensure that at home they are also to check with the teachers in schools. Many teachers were also caught and prepared. Do you have any feedback from the teachers on what challenges they faced? For example, some of them were asked to prepare some learning content and send to their children, including private school and also public school. So I think if that has not been done, maybe it is something the ministry can consider and think about to also learn from other stakeholders on the challenges and see how they can be accommodated in the national emergency plan. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take 3 questions and then respond, and then we do another round. So welcome, madam.
Thank you.
And please, if you could introduce yourself and where you come from, that would be very useful.
Thank you. I'm Teresa Salomo from Morogoro region. I'm a member of Untitled, and I'm executive director for the NGO Chapter in the government organization in Morogoro, and we are working on education in 3 districts out of 9 in Morogoro, that is River, in Fakarabisi, and in Gomero. I did also, I agree that there was no one in the world who did the preparedness of this COVID. No one, including ourselves. And again, as the commissioner said, we have had outbreaks like Mbunga, rainfall, floods, and all this and all that. But again, I don't think Madam Zaida, that we did have some sessions. For example, in Morogoro, the Ministry of Education had some lessons online, like a Moody tradition and Vedic tradition for 3 subjects for 3 days per week. But then that program, which was followed in towns, but for the children or the parents in the rural mosques, the network had relatively positively availability of the facility of the TV and radios. It was not easy for the children. So what I'm asking, if we could have done the evaluation, what went well during those 2.5 months, which the children learned online, and what went not went well, so that we can now accommodate the time planning. as she said, not only the challenge was not only that we lost time, but what happened to the children who got pregnant during that time. So many children, apart from losing the period of learning, but they have also recovered some of getting pregnant. And again, if we are here going to make an evaluation, let us go in depth and go and think out of the box. Who were the responsible for those pregnancies? Some of them were being done by brothers inside their house. So what I'm suggesting again, that in case we are going to plan for emergency programs, forget not NGOs, we are there. I'm waiting so that you can hear me.
Yes,
Forget not the NGOs to be included. The CSOs, we are working very hard. But when the plans were being online by the ministry, we were out of the place. I mean, the NGO could not be arranged that can you also assist. So forget not, please. Delegate members, we are all over the country, and we are there doing the patient.
Thank you. The last question in this round, welcome, madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mine is also is a comment that is also a way forward, maybe that the two panelists will help us. Madam Pauline talked about continuity of education, and this is preparedness and continuity of education. I think this is not only relevant during the any disaster. This is something that should be happening even when there is no disaster. I could say the private schools are better prepared even when there is no disaster. They are sending assignments. The parent-teacher interaction is higher with the private schools than with the public schools. The public schools don't really consider home school interaction. And I think if you really want to have that continuity, you really want to have parents or guardians on your side as you go on educating the pupils, the children. But if you don't do that, it seems like they are forced. Like parents are not doing it well. Parents, I mean, teachers are saying parents are not really taking good responsibility of educating their children. And parents are saying teachers are not doing a good job in educating our children. So everybody is pointing things at one another, especially with the public schools. And I think that needs to be addressed. And on the policy side, we want to see that improve. Private schools are doing that. And I have grandchildren for whom the teachers, I do get message on my cell phone, on my smartphone, coming, the school has a WhatsApp. They will tell me what's going on, what is missing about their children, what they need. They have this interaction is much higher, and you have this amicable relationship between parents and teachers than we do have with our public schools. So I think we really need to address it. Because the private schools are really recognizing that parents are important stakeholders. Because they are the ones paying, they are the ones bringing in money, and so they are survival kind of depends on the parents. But on the public side, they are seeing these are useless people, they don't take care of their children, and so on and so forth. So you don't have that relationship. And I think that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. So we will hear responses from the panelists now, starting from the commissioner and then Pauline.
Thank you very much, moderator. And let me start with the last comment about provision of parents has been critical for provision for quality education on a continuous basis. The ministry is very aware about the role of parents in the provision of education and the child development in general, from early childhood to university. So I don't think that parents have been forgotten in the business of education with regard to public schools. No, what we are doing is to sensitize communities and get adapt to there was a time when we said what education officer should be involved seriously to make sure that the world education officers, the wells, together with the heads of schools, make sure that bring together communities around their schools to sensitize them about their role towards quality education provision to their young ones. So we had that campaign, and we are sure that most of the parents participated. They know their role, and they know how to take part in education, whether at home or at school. To prove that one, many of the regions now have even started school feeding programs. They are quite out, they said, no, we cannot accept for day scholars to stay hungry for the entire day. We must do something to provide our kids with something to make them stay in school and engage lessons effectively. And that shows that parents are now aware about their roles in education. So they are not ignored. We have preached that, for example, in every chapter we say parents are the first and the most continuous teachers. If you leave them behind, you cannot accept, you cannot expect a success in education. So that was the comment which was raised by Madame Dr. Theodora Bali with regard to how we get parents in the education pursuits. And then there was a question about is there any evaluation on the interventions made? I think currently we don't have a study that we have done. There's no study that has been done, including the question raised by the first speaker. There's no study that has been done so far that I can come up with and say, these are the findings that have been scientifically found. No. Maybe we take that idea and see if we can wait on that. To make a single evaluation like what some people will say, I think we talk that also. We take that and see how we can wait on that one. We evaluate what's happening, including the issue of pregnancy, which have been raised. Thank you.
Just to add what Commissioner said, about engagement with teachers, parents, but engagement of teachers just automatic. They are the one who were even sensitizing parents and the communities in collaboration with the one education officers. And there was a time when we used our institutions, Tanzania Institute of Education and the National Examination Council of Tanzania to use the expert teachers to prepare lessons through radios. In most villages, radios they are there. It may not have TVs, but radios are there. So some of those students were in the rural areas, we are learning through the radios. Of course, the one who is in the town places may have more advantage than the one in the rural, but all of them reach something on the distance learning which was taking place during school projects. And the teachers also were also assisting students, especially those who were close to parents. They meet their parents and guide them on how to assist students. But we know that there may be some shortages, of course, not 100%. And also we know the importance of continuity of learning. Currently, we have started preparing a studio at Tanzania, e-learning studio in Tanzania Institute of Education, so that we can have continuity of learning all the time. And this one will be reached by the government and non-government students. And even before preparation of this studio, we were using TBC in collaboration with Tanzania Institute of Education and some stakeholders like School Direct to make sure that students learn in collaboration with the different with teachers and other stakeholders. So things are there to make sure that continuity of learning will would take place during pandemic and also for preparedness season. Yes. But I also thank you very much for your contribution as Commissioner. Some of your comments are important for the government to work on a strategy for the future.
Thank you, Madam Pauline. Yes, interesting indeed, especially the pay certificate for further action. Can we open for another round of questions now? So I will pick up one hand from that side, and then hand number 2, 8 at the very end, and then I come to this side. So let's do that and see how we progress. Straight on.
Thank you, moderator. I have a very short question. I'm very glad to hear that we now have a strategy to address any matters that might occur in our country. I would like to know if we have the budget now to implement that strategy this fiscal year. Otherwise, if we don't have money to implement the strategy, then it will just become another document, and that will only be there and waiting for another emergency to erupt. Because there's also, we may say that the pandemic is over now, so we don't need to budget for it, and we wait for another emergency. So is there any budget, by the way, to implement the strategy? That is my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you so much. My name is Simon Witabo. I work for the African Foundation in Tanzania. I really appreciate the government, particularly for coming up with a national strategy for emergency preparedness in the education sector. And I wanted to just give a comment, particularly encouraging the importance of research and data in developing strategies, particularly helping to address challenges that may come as a result of these emergencies. I like the study that was cited earlier by Dr. Sofile in some other countries. And I wonder whether we have a plan to assess the impact of the COVID-19. I mean, the 3 months closure period, particularly on the quality of education, but also disaggregated by gender. We know there were a lot of efforts by different stakeholders, including the government and the civil society organizations, and a lot of challenges that were encountered during that moment, ranging around from lack of proper content to the channels of deliveries, and even a lot of challenges involving income, segregation of households, whereby those in the lowest income quartile had no access even to radio or any kind of avenues to access the online and distance learning. So I just wonder whether there is a plan for the government to do an assessment of that brief period in relation to the impact on learning outcomes, because we know even the requirement of the government for teachers to cover the syllabus, teachers were also not prepared, and so everybody would be just rushing to make sure that they meet those deadlines and may not necessarily be matched into the learning of the delivery, the quality of the delivery. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The last hand here, please.
Okay, thanks a lot. My name is Lesha Poera from Roria, Mara region, the CEO of the Amora organization. So mine just give a piece of advice to the ministry. So during the closure period for schools, primary students suffer a lot, especially in remote areas, because during the infrastructure is poor. Sometimes even the network is not available. Even the radios, maybe some of them they use that time to to agriculture to keep on the look after animals. So there is a need of facilitating, or there is need of use of IT in remote areas. For example, the ministry can have a budget of buying computers, even photocopy, so that we produce some copies of those children. Because we saw that Lutheran of the street have nothing to do. So the same as teachers. When the private schools are just preparing somewhere for the students, the government school, private schools were just working time there. So there is a need of, I don't know how the government prepared their budget in order to equip IT in the school, in primary schools. So there is a bit kulikuwa na changamoto kidogo hasa katika shule za primary, lakini sekondari kulikuwa na aweni. Sasa mimi nafikiri ni shauri wizara iangalie namna nzuri ambapo wanaweza kutumia IT katika shule zake. Mimi nilikuwa napenda just so other ministry.
Thank you. Yes, we will now ask the colleagues to respond, again starting from Madam Colleague and then ending with the Commissioner. Welcome.
Thank you very much. As I said before, for Tanzania, we had only 3 months. Not like the other countries, I have to make 6 or more. So, and as I was saying, there was something taking place from distance learning, through radios, through CMS and X. And when we opened the schools, we counseled our teachers that we have start where different teachers we start where they ended or where she ended. And then we speed up the learning accordingly. And they were very positive. They didn't even any problem maybe to with that. So they responded positively supporting students. They lost time of 3 months because it was March to June. And the assessment which was conducted, for instance, final assessment for it was by that time it was 46 students. They've done even better. Then after December, for those who set for ordinary level certificate examination, they also have done very well. You can go to the website of National Examination Council of Tanzania check and compare with the previous year. You shall find that they've done very well. So our teachers really commend their efforts. They did well, and the things are going well. We thank God for that. And I also thank you very much for your contributions on making sure that our rural schools have be connected to internet and the IT whatever. The government is trying its best. Currently, we have rural electrification. When you have electricity in the village, it is easy even to apply IT and whatever. So the government is continuing with that. And our curricula have knowledge on the IT for primary and even for secondary. But you advise for the government to make sure that it budgets, to make sure that schools, maybe tablets, whatever, is a good advice. Thank you very much for the advice, but they are within plans of the government. Thank you for your good comments. And the importance of the research as well. Thank you for the contribution. You cannot say strongly on anything if you have not done a research. If you have results of research, statistics, is when you can support your idea. So thank you very much on that. May it please the commissioner.
Thank you very much, Madam Paulina. I think I've said it all. Maybe what I would say is to appreciate that indeed schools located in rural areas were most affected compared to those located in other areas. That is an appreciation. Everybody knows that schools that are located in remote areas hardly have connectivity. So the issue of radio, the issue of television was problematic in those areas. And that is the issue that was raised by His Excellency Dr. Yakaji when he was giving his keynote speech here. So what's going on now, as my colleague has just pointed out, is to make sure that rural areas have electricity. That would be an important step towards connecting schools in rural areas in the future. There was an issue of the importance of research. Any intellectual with sober mind cannot demean the role of research or data to inform plans and practices. We appreciate that we need to have data that have been scientifically generated to inform plans and practices. And due to the fact that the government alone cannot be successful without your active participation, let me take this opportunity to welcome all non-state actors here. If you have the capacity to finance, you are most welcome. Come with an idea. Tell us that, please, Ministry of Education and Technology, I have this idea, and I have the capacity to do that work. Present that and each to us. Together, as a family, bring it up an idea, bring it. So, the village of that one, then we proceed as a nation. So I think that is an important thing. It's not if we do that, then actually we can have a very bright future. Let's look collectively. You have an idea, you have finance, you have an agreement to the ministry, we share, then we move forward. That is my request. So the person who is interested in data, we are also very much interested in data that are generated scientifically, not ad hoc means of data. Not lay-based statements. So we need scientifically generated statements that arise from scientific research, rigorous research. And then there was an issue of how prepared are we to implement the strategy for preparedness. We are in the final stage of development. So that also is being taken care of as we finalize the document. There must be a space in the document that shows how this will be implemented. So we are not preparing this for shelving in our shelves only. No, we are preparing it to say as a guide to action. So there will be that aspect. We cannot prepare it to shelf somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. As we move to the final leg of the discussions, I would really like questions now, especially those that are seeking for partnerships and asking specifically, what do you want from the government? What is what would partners be really requesting from the ministry, from Bureau and all that? So let's, Madam, up at the center there. Yes, one, and then Madam. Yes, yourself, and then. Oh, gentlemen, there. So it doesn't really get a fight. So let me go for Madam. I see lots of hands for Madam. So yes, Madam. Yes. Let's see how we progress. I can protect you. Yes. Please, just be brief, state the point, and then we see a here.
Thank you very much. My name is Marianne Shizzi. I work with the Foundation for Tomorrow in Arusha. My question is a plea. First is a plea to the commissioner who mentioned that you will come us as civil societies to come and collaborate with you in taking education further. But I suggest that you please help us understand better how the system works. Sometimes we get frustrated by the bureaucracy. The processes are too long. You have an intervention and you approach the government bodies to help us maybe put things through, but it becomes cumbersome, hectic, and sometimes tiring, where you have to move one step and another step back, then you move a step forward, 2 steps back, and sometimes these things take as long as 2 years. Sometimes you end up giving up on something that would really be helpful. So could you please help us maybe understand how it would really work and how exactly can we work together to get things moving and happening? 2, I was talking to Madame Paulina. She mentioned that, okay, the 3-month school closure, after that the teachers will give them counseling to be able to push the classes very fast to come up the next time. But also the commissioner mentioned that you have contingency in place in case another pandemic comes up. But could I also call upon the government or the state to consider teachers very much in these plans, should I call them? For example, if you have a government school teacher with over 100 students in his or her class, and you expect them to rush a lesson, cover up for lost time in 3 months, and they have to rush this lesson maybe, or rush their lessons in the next 6 months before the year ends, trust me, the lived reality is it's not going to be inclusive. There are students who are going to be left behind. The slow learners will be left behind because the teacher is running up to finishing the syllabus by the end of the year. So also, as you think about these contingencies or plans in place, make consideration of the teachers, much as the government school teachers were paid during the 3 months closure, and like most of the private school teachers were frustrated. But also, when it came to the reality of applying these, of putting in place the plans that we put, that we are going to extend maybe class hours, you're going to have extra hours to deal with students and so on and so forth, and the teachers be thought about in one way or another to make not only their work easier, but also to make that education beneficial to the students. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, the moderator and the chair. My name is Rose. I'm coming from ACT. ACT stands for Action on Disability and Development. And I'm really glad the commissioner talked about the strategy. Commissioner here is Yes, yeah. I'm very happy that I talk about this strategy. It's a very exciting thing that is coming up. The most important aspect for us is the issues of the inclusivity for the children with disabilities. We are running a program in Kwani, and we would like to understand a little bit the content, especially the training that you are planning to put on board is inclusive. But the awareness, the persons, the children with disabilities have been left out on awareness materials in large print, braille, and other communicative materials which are accessible. And also talk about technologies, and also the former president talk about it. And I would like also to understand that I would like us all to open up the forum where we could talk a little bit about how the technologies can as well be accessible and also be able to include the deaf, blind, the visual, and those who have got a more powerful disabilities. I'm also interested in the PPEs as well as on WASH, because they are a very, very important aspect, especially for those with disabilities in the pandemic period. And the second question for me is more also in terms of collaborations. We have heard from our president, Somalia, that we need to look at the pandemic in a broader perspective. Tanzania is around the global, so there are some risks. Just to let you know that, for example, adding also with Bangladesh, and the pandemic there is scaling up, and also we have had what is happening in India. So I'm just curious to understand if there are any preparedness which are coming up as of now, because we still have our children in school, and there have been some people talking on social media about category being shifted from 10 to 20 now, rather than the usual, assuming the older generation are more at a risk, but now we're talking about
this new one. And we have also heard that maybe in Uganda, there are also some risks. So I would like as well to understand how the ministry, because our children are still in school, some boarding, how are we prepared for this? And if there is any news regarding thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, the other hand, there was that list up there. It was this here. Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sukile and the panelists for the nice discussion that has been going on. Thank you very much for the clarifications given from the ministry. And I'm not very far from my former who contributed to this discussion, but I would like to give my advice to the government of the Ministry of Education and the Bureau that if we have not done a research before coming up with a strategy, I feel that it's a good thing that we carry out the study across the country, seeing how the pandemic affected different groups. And because as I was listening to you, it came out, or it's on my side, I understood that the strategy is there, but how was it's being prepared? It's almost completed. The document is almost to be completed. But who were the stakeholders who were consulted, who took part in preparation of the strategy? It has not come very clear to me. So it seems like it has not been that much inclusive to ensure that all the ideas from different actors in education are taken on board so that we are really prepared and the strategy is in full swing to make sure that we are not waiting for another disaster so that we implement the strategy. So for me, I am advising the government or the ministry that we are not late. We better have the insights from all the regions across the country on how people were affected differently with the pandemic. This will help to enrich the strategy and the means of implementing the strategy. Because I understand Madam Pauline was talking about we are going to implement the strategy and we have rural electrification, and if we are talking of improvement in science and technology teaching, everyone will be it will be easier for everyone to catch up with the methodologies. But rural electrification, yes, if I say most of the villages have electricity, but it's not all the households. Very few in the village, very few households have electricity. I'm coming from Arusha, just at the township of Arusha, but during COVID outbreak, we tried as much as possible to make learning continue outside of the school, but most of the children in the households had no access to radio. Very few has access to radio, very few have access to television. So if the government is not able to conduct the study to inform much more the strategy, I'm advising, because nowadays we have several civil societies across the country who did the study, but we didn't publish the study because I know the procedures now, if you want to publish your study and the data that you have collected, maybe the ministry can collaborate with these civil societies across the country to get the insights of how people were affected with the pandemic, and this can help to inform the strategy that we are trying to bring it forth for implementation and ensure that it is going to address the challenges across the country, not for the few. That is my advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Very elaborate. Thank you so very much. I will now invite Commissioner or Madam Pauline to start first, and then Commissioner to
Thank you very much.
for that mic switch off, Madam, please.
Much all of you for your good contribution. Yes, that is the one who said that bureaucracy or partnership, making partnership with the government. Those who get problems as a testify to my experience with the Commission of Acceptance and those who start the implementation, even before consulting the government. If you want to work with the government in the education, you should sign a memorandum of understanding with Ministry of Education and Science, Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, which is the sector ministry. But some of our stakeholders do start implementation in districts without even signing a memorandum of understanding. They proceeded that you should apply to partner with the government by submitting your project document so that the government can advise you the appropriate way of doing it. But most of them just start. And then they come one day. I invite the commissioner to come to my meeting of which project, sharing with the parents on how to guide students to learn, their children to learn. When did you start? I started in 2022. The problem, you just apply first, and then you submit your project, that document for advice. And then after that, then you will write an MOU based on your project objectives. Just shortly like that, but not all of you. I say most of them. I have experienced this, that most of them just start with individuals in the areas there without even consulting with them. For those who say about motivating teachers, we accept it. But during recovery of learning, we didn't force teachers to cover. We did this. We used the free periods. We didn't extend the learning time during the same day. We reduced the free periods for teaching. We also reduced the number of days for leave. We reduced the number for leave so that can be used for learning. So teachers were not forced to teach throughout the day, no. Another thing was on the children with special needs. Thank you very much for your contribution. This is the area which we always accept advice from our stakeholders. The area of our concern, even for the government itself. But it is the priority of the government of supporting children with special needs and even supporting them with assistive devices, including the technological ones. For those, for instance, those with vision disability, they have been talking what they've been given talking computers. They type and she talks, he hears, or she hears, and then she responds. So we welcome all of you to support us on this area, and then we have even the special area under the Commissioner for Education with the Director for Special Needs. So you can even come at our ministry and talk to in details with the Director of Special Needs on how the plans or training, whatever. You can just come and discuss with her on how to support this. So welcome anyone who wants to support something on special needs. And the implementation of the strategy, after preparing the document, because this strategy is to ensure that we respond to emergencies anytime. So after finishing the preparation of the strategy, it will be mainstreamed in the government budgets so that it can be implemented, because it will not be implemented as emergencies all the time. But there are sometimes when you implement things so that when emergency comes, you are on the track. So that's all on the preparedness strategy, but we have to engage the consultants on this, and the consultant will go throughout the country. May not reach some of you, everyone, but it will get people of different levels, from those who play the ones to the currently get used on how the business strategy can respond.
Commissioner, please, and Kandata.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And let me start by saying, if there is any stakeholder here who has done a study secretly, please bring it to me. We will welcome that. Don't hide it. You are most welcome. We want to get to that. They will bring it, receive it, and work on it. See how we can work with that one. We want to work as a family. That was number one. And that's having a study to inform preparation of the strategy. And then the issue of inclusivity, Madam Pauline has said it all. We are very, very much aware about different categories of kids who must receive quality education. We have a document entitled Guidelines for School Construction and Maintenance. No school will be accredited if it does not meet the standards that are set, including those for children with special needs. I will never accredit any school that does not meet standards for kids with special needs. She has just said, we have even prepared the sign language dictionary. We now have Lugha ya Alama Tanzania. We have now that one, an e-dictionary for kids to use to make them perform better in their teaching learning processes. So, and we have provided a number of assistive devices, training them in terms of ICT. And so if you go to our schools now, they have ramps everywhere. You go to the toilet, you find that they are state of the art for those which are being put, are being built now. There was the issue of we must consider teachers as top actors in the education sector. We are agree with you. But also we have to remember that quantitative aspects of education provides an important entry point into quality improvement. Studies have shown that most countries started with expansion and then shifted to quality improvement. So we know that teachers are facing serious challenges with regard to handling huge number of students in the class. But that is a positive aspect, is a credit to education. We are now moving to quality improvement. So we are quite aware of that. I think, and then finally, to conclude, if there is any person who has an idea, please come to the ministry. This week on Thursday, one of you will be come to the ministry to present his proposal. On Friday, we'll be having another person. If the collaborative process was cumbersome previously, it is not done. Just come and we'll give you the platform, the forum to present what you are thinking about. And within 2 weeks, we'll have another proposal.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think this is the right tone to really end the panel. Ladies and gentlemen, I still see a lot of hands. We have a platform for interactions, but I'm really needed of time. We have 2 more panels coming in, but quickly to summarize 3 things that brought this out of the session. Number 1 is CAM. I think that's really quite encouraging, especially into the sector. So CAM, and that's a wide open, arms open invitation for partnerships moving forward. And number 2 is collaboration. So you have anything you want to engage, if it was not happening in the past, now it will happen. Very good promise from the government side. And number 3, study, evidence, and all that. So if you're hiding that study somewhere, please bring it out into the light. If you're planning a study, please engage. And if you have any case study that you know of which could be beneficial for the family as the commissioner put it, please put it again into the light. So ladies and gentlemen, without much ado, and I ask you now to put your hands together to our panelists for a job well done as they take part in their seats.
Let's congratulate our chair. And any pending issues, just get onto the app and just load in your ideas. I can see people already writing some very good suggestions. So we move on with the next presentation. We're going to have a very late lunch. And I was thinking maybe the delegates, we just had tea, right?
Yes.
So we should proceed. Should we probably finish and then go and just settle down for dinner? All right. All right, very good. So let's move on to the next one, which will have been after lunch, as it was written. Dr. Ellen Otaro, it's your chance now. Your hands, ladies and gentlemen. I believe we are going to be putting hands. And probably if you could also give the 1 hour. You use the chat room as much as possible, because we can pick up on these questions whenever we have some free time. Perhaps in the morning, for example, we can always have clarifications from speakers and the different presenters. Karibu sana, let me hand it over straight to you without much ado. Leave your program in front of you and your panelists. There you go. Welcome, Mr. David Simon from here.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. I will. As I have a presentation. Yeah. Yeah. Point. Wakati anabadilisha slide anabadilisha na huko. Eh? Iko. It will be projected. Yeah, that's our application. You can see here. Yes, here. No.
Good afternoon. I would like to introduce to you the next speaker and the person who will take us through the session and definitely will answer your questions. This is Kobe Simon. He is a PhD student in project management at the University of Kenya. And he has a master's in education in curriculum studies. Kobe studied at Makerere University in Uganda. And currently he works as the regional education advisor for East and Southern Africa in education outbound program. David's theme is on enhancing the role of civil society organization in education sector monitoring and accountability. I happen to go through his very interesting publication, and it is something that we heard earlier today on the roles and responsibility of the civil society. We're also hearing the same issue happening throughout our sessions, not only in the morning session, but also in the afternoon session. And most of us here are actually the members of the civil society. And we have a very key role to play in the education sector. Different issues, different aspects, but all of them related to the quality education that we are seeking, the investment, and holding accountable not only our politicians, but also our implementers in the education sector. So I would like to now invite Obia David to take us through the presentation, and then he will join me here at the table and respond to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kari. The introduction statement has been, I was requested to discuss a paper on the role of the civil society in monitoring and accountability and how we can enhance that. So basically, I would like to say that what I'm going to do here is just highlights of the main paper, but the full paper is available with the workshop organizers and it can be read later. So basically, I'll concentrate on the talking points that will guide our discussion, such that if there is any of us who would want to contribute. I would also like to say that what I'm going to say is not final, that you are free to think otherwise and come up with new ideas. So basically, mine is just to bring up the points that will excite our minds and discussion so that we can further look into how we can enhance the role of civil society. Yes, that's the outline. I don't think I will go through all those slides or that outline because of time at the moment, but I will spend some little time on introduction. Then I probably will mention about one slide. I'll talk about a few issues on accountability and monitoring in the context of education, so that we understand the background within which we want to build our role as civil society. Then I will mention about what is our role, what are we expected to do, highlights. And then we shall move to conceptual and empirical basis of this role. It must be based on some kind of conception, and also find out what others are saying in terms of the roles that are played by civil society in holding governments accountable. We'll look at some moderating factors. These moderating factors mediate the relationship between civil society and government and how you're able to influence So they will be critical. If you are able to manipulate them very well, you will enhance your influence. So it is important we look at them. And then the question of transparency and accountability within the civil society. Of course, we want to look at aspects of local standard to question government. If you yourself, you are not inwardly looking at the transparency and accountability, on what basis do you approach government to tell them you must be accountable? So there is the issue of inward and downward accountability of the civil society. Then we also have a very critical role that is played by external factors. This morning we talked about that and seeing how partners are helping us, and then we'll have some conclusions and recommendations. So in terms of the introduction, we want to look at what is the problem, what are we discussing at the moment? And we want to say that we appreciate the role that is played by the civil society in terms of monitoring government policies and also contributing to their development. It is a critical role that mediates state and market. Market is the people who receive the services and state is the government. So when civil society comes in between, it mediates that relationship. They influence how the government structures the services that are going to the market, to the people. So we find that we appreciate that it is a critical role. And we know that there are so many civil society organizations that are doing that work today, and they are playing that role. And this one has varied degrees of effectiveness and impact. So our question is, how can we enhance civil society role for greater moderated effect? For example, I've just said that we have some moderating kind of factors that come in between the state, the civil society, and the market. The market is the public, which receives the services from the state. So how can the civil society come and play a more effective role to influence this kind of tripartite relationship? And we have a general assumption as we present this. We think that if CSOs effectively monitor education policies and programs, then accountability and service delivery will improve, thereby reaching out even to the marginalized and vulnerable groups through a process of enhancing monitoring and accountability. So what we'll be looking at is we would want to improve or enhance how civil society engages. How are they organized? What do they do? How do they get resources? And how do they approach government? Is it always confrontational or a partnership kind of approach? We'll look at that and see what is possible. And then we believe if this happens effectively, then there is an effect that can come, a positive effect that can come from that engagement, where there will be increased accountability and service delivery to provide equitable quality education, especially to the marginalized groups. So, and this assumption, we examined it around 5 questions. We will not go question by question, but when we go to the main paper, you will see that there as you read the text. One, we ask ourselves, does civil society engagement substantially improve accountability in practice, or it is just statements that we make? So we will be looking at that. We also ask ourselves, in the event that civil society succeeds in influencing government, is it always in the positive direction, or there are aspects, there are negative effects that could come from civil society influencing or attempting to hold governments accountable? Then the third question we ask is, what are the factors that moderate this relationship? As for effectiveness of civil society, what are some of the factors? And these factors are very important, because if they moderate the relationship or our ability to influence, then we need to pay a lot of attention to them, because it is by manipulating them that we are able to enhance our influence, depending on how we work with them. Then we ask ourselves again, Are civil society themselves independent of inequalities and transparency? Those are some of the questions. And finally, how does entry of external actors influence that? We look at case studies, selected case studies, and some empirical studies to answer these questions. Of course, all of them aligned to issues relating to accountability and monitoring in the education sector. So I'm doing two things at the same time. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. We'll just go straight to the case studies and some empirical studies that tell us about these questions or about the assumption that we hold that if we enhance the role of civil society in monitoring and accountability, then there will be improved service delivery in education sector, especially accessing quality education to the marginalized and vulnerable. So, yeah, I will keep that for now. Yeah, this was just to give a background of the state of affairs. Generally, this is global, it's not in Tanzania. It's generally the issues in education that are currently on our table. We mentioned them there. We said despite progress, we can see literacy and numeracy competencies are not matching class grades. In the morning, we had a lot of discussions on whether we are teaching for exams or we are teaching for skills. That's one problem that we need to deal with. There is focus on examinations instead of skills, and this is not a problem of Tanzania only, it is a problem across Africa. And if you look at it, it is the foundations on which education in Africa is built. If you look at the philosophy of education in Africa, it is built on a colonial foundation, which was mainly to train people as rote learners. They memorize, when they come, they are asked, and they do. So there is need to change that foundational concept of education, and that would help us shift the thinking towards passing an exam towards gaining skills. There's acute underinvestment in technical and vocational training. This is also happening across most countries. Low quality private universities negate the basic essence of higher education. There is proliferation of universities in Africa, especially private universities. Some of them are even residential houses. You see? But what is the essence of higher education? So if you look at it from that context, you see it is compromising the quality. That is why you see someone says, we are graduates, but we are selling SIM cards. So basically, there is a little bit of compromise because of the freelance kind of everyone operating that field. We have issues of facilities, we have issues of gender discrimination, we have issues of problem of inadequate qualified teachers, and there has been significant reversal of gains recently because of COVID-19. So there's need really for the civil society to re-examine their role and see how we can enhance this role and be able to influence improved quality service delivery to the people. Okay, yeah. In the context of education, there are 4 aspects that UNESCO cites. There are main elements for an effective education accountability and monitoring process. One, there is need to be or have a credible education sector plan that is developed through a consultative broad process. So one of the ways that we can start building our role and enhancing it is making sure that at the beginning of developing of the education sector plan, we are part of the process. The second one is access to information and data for meaningful education sector engagement. Without data, without information, you will be dropping in the dark. So there is need to work with Either they are researchers, independent or government departments, whether it is the Central Bureau of Statistics, whether it's the Education Management Information System, but at least there is need to have reliable data for you to enhance your role. Then there is need to focus on strengthening the conventional accountability mechanisms. These are the ones that you will find within the government systems and structures. The issues of political checks and balances, the issues of audits, and administrative procedures. This should not be left to the structures and systems of governance alone, but civil society should be able to interact with these conventional accountability structures and question where they find that they're inadequate. Then, finally, there is need to seek to improve education service delivery, budget transparency, and freedom of information. Yeah, we've talked about budget, and at least here the information about budget is available, but there are some jurisdictions you will go and find that information may not be available. In essence, what we are saying is that there are 4 basic elements that we need to consider when we want to build our process of accountability monitoring within the education sector. So a little bit of the role of civil society. We find 2 dimensions. One is theoretical, the other one is normative. The theoretical one deals with the assumption or the understanding that social life and social values must be upheld. That you do this as a civil society, there is an element, if you look at the history of civil society, there is an element of charity and community welfare. The conviction that social values and social life must be upheld in its best form is the theoretical concept that drives us. The normative concept is that citizens need motivation and organization in order to be conscientized enough and take action. So once you are convinced that you hold a duty to uphold social values and the social life, then you move ahead and design programs or actions that will organize and mobilize or give the people a platform that they can be conscientized and start reflecting on their issues and take action. So those are the aspects that we need to look at. And if we are to organize our interventions in that manner, of course, it starts by interpreting the policies to the people. First of all, making them understand or having them understand the intentions of the policies, the programs that underlie the policies, and then how they are being implemented and the role they can play in monitoring that. That would help them. The rest, we mentioned about becoming a critical friend of government. Traditionally, around a decade or 2 decades ago, it was imagined that civil society, for it to be impactful, it must be confrontational, it must make noise, and it must cause a lot of disruption. But this is changing nowadays. We are saying there are synergies that require to be built between the civil society and government, where the civil society acts as a critical friend of government. In fact, by saying that, we are not saying that you should completely be compromised. Even in a situation of lack of trust, that situation itself makes things happen, because this one is afraid of, is just conscious of the other partner in this relationship. So we are saying that we can build synergies with government processes, but become a critical friend within that synergy, not become a drum beater of when they want to say anything about that. So yeah, then we can move to the next slide. Yeah, now this is where we want to cite some examples that will give us case studies or empirical studies that have demonstrated that civil society engagement can improve the service delivery, and so that we can borrow from that. So this is what I said, that of course that is the assumption. Improved civil society engagement can push accountability in public service delivery. And there is a direct relationship that exists between civil society action and accountability and improved service delivery. Of course, I said there are moderating factors in that relationship, and these factors have the potential to shape the nature, direction, and strength of that relationship of civil society action and accountability. So our interest is to find out how we can manipulate these factors, and we use case studies and empirical evidence to look at a few of these. So I'll start with case studies. We have one case study from Zambia. These are excerpts from some of the partners that we work with within the EOL, the Education Out Loud program, and I just selected one or two based on how I could think it would fit. So here we say that this is a case where the Zambia National Education Coalition was able to push for equal access to quality education for vulnerable children, and this was in the context of COVID-19. So it happens that COVID-19 has come and schools have closed, and government says that learning will have to continue online, and this continues for several months. Many children from rural and poor households are missing out of school for the reasons we've had here. Remoteness, lack of physical infrastructure, and of course, no connectivity. But now this situation needed to be arrested, and the organization, the Zambia National Education Coalition, finds a way to engage government so that they are able to undertake a national assessment exercise to check on the readiness of schools to reopen so that they save the children who are missing out. And they succeed in convincing them, and therefore they undertake a joint countrywide assessment. And the findings is that majority of schools are adhering to the COVID-19 rules that are put. And therefore, based on the report, SANEC is able to convince the Joint Education Sector Review meeting and the local education group meetings that have an influence on policy decisions that the country is ready to be open. And on 18th September 2020, the president announced that the school will open. What are the success factors here? Evidence-based advocacy. If SANEC did not go out to undertake an assessment, then they would be at pains to convince government to open school. There's use of the media. They had a nationwide media friend of campaign, and of course, being the critical friend of government. They had working relations with government, and that's why they were able to convince them to go together and undertake the assessment. But while they undertake the assessment, they are being the critical friend, helping a friend so that it works. We have another one here in Somalia. Somalia was undergoing a process of a curriculum review, but the coalition in Somalia, through one of its members who deals with visually impaired children, understands that there is no policy on production of braille materials under the textbook program. So during the curriculum review process, Somalia coalition manages through its member to get into the committee that is dealing with the textbook program. And through that, they are able to convince the government that we need a braille material production program under the textbook program. And this is succeeds in the sense that the member who was dealing with the visually impaired children becomes a member of the committee. You see, now you do not only even influence from outside, you are even co-opted into the official committee that is developing the braille materials under the textbook program. So that's another strategy. So success factor there is strategic engagement. The coalition identified the curriculum review process as a very strategic point of engagement, and they were successful, and also evidence and past experience. Yeah, that's what I just said. We have, I'll just mention 3 or 4, then we move. I think I can mention this. This is about the coalition in Zimbabwe that was able to lobby for increased budget allocation to education sector. So the process was like, after the minister presented the budget to parliament, the coalition worked with the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Education to convene meetings with the stakeholders and analyze the budget. From there, they prepared a memorandum of recommendations, which was presented to the floor of the House by the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Education. And based on the debate that ensued on the floor of the House, the Minister for Finance and Economic Development managed to accept the proposals to increase the budget for education. So these are some of the examples of how, practical examples of how civil society has succeeded to influence policy processes. And by participating, they ensure that the process of accountability and monitoring is there. So one of the success factors here was working with Parliament as people's representative. I saw we had a member of Parliament as a panelist. This is good, so that we keep them close when we have things that we want discussed on the floor of the House. We have friendly members of Parliament, and also use of evidence and facts. I'll skip the other case studies. One, I'll just mention them. The fourth one, yeah. One, this is about enhancing, expanding CSO participation in Kenya, where after COVID-19, they didn't have a chance to penetrate or sit in the National Emergency Committee. I had it here also that civil society did not have a chance, but now they went down to their members and they started a grassroots campaign that eventually became national. Then we have some other 2 cases in South Sudan. They managed to work with parents to bring back girls who had dropped out of school because of early pregnancies and early marriages, and they were able to pursue justice for those who had been offended. So this one, working with the affected communities, can also help. So a little bit of some studies. We also see social audits and community scorecards have, based on studies that have been done, have proven that they can influence government, based on some studies that have been done in Kenya and Uganda. So when we want to enhance the role of civil society, as part of our approaches and tools that we want to use, we can use social audits and community scorecards. We've also seen participatory budget processes based on a study that was done also in Uganda. But this study brings in another aspect of the passive participant. You know, you can be participating but passive. The essence, I mean, the issue is that some of these, because of a lot of heightened civil society noise around community participation, some government processes bring people just for purposes of them sitting and being seen there. That is passive participation. And when there's passive participation, we do not expect anything to be influenced by the civil society. So there needs to be the element of active participation. And then we have other studies that have shown budget monitoring and focused on public expenditure tracking. So if you want to enhance your role in monitoring accountability and in the education sector, you need to explore some of these approaches that have proven to have worked. We have the issue of aid transparency initiatives. It showed that There was decrease in corruption relating to aid received, where aid transparency programs were there. So there's need to monitor what comes to finance education, either through the civil society or through government. So if you are engaged in those transparency programs, you are more likely to increase efficiency than when you just observe from the sidelines. Then there's the issue of downward accountability. It shows that this study shows that there would be power sharing among partners implementing the project. No one would feel subdued by the other. There would influence the mindset of the beneficiaries and also would enhance TSO and NGO legitimacy. So the other aspects, the other approaches that can be used to enhance the role of civil society as per the literature that is reviewed is the Open Budget Initiative. This is an international program. We can pursue it further, but it has proven that it enhances efficiency and accountability. There is public expenditure tracking systems. This one was piloted in Uganda in as early as 2006, I think, and it did very well. Although it brings in another aspect, when people were given information about the budget, it monitored the budget that was allocated by the Minister of Education and what actually went to school. But people found out that what was allocated was not the one that was going to school. So basically, they were able to engage government and increase that. But finally, we also look at the broader socioeconomic aspects. Now, I will go straight to conclusions because we've seen the studies. Then I will look at the recommendations that we need to make. So, the rest, like I said, is in a paper that we can look at later. So we have some key conclusions, evidence. We have evidence that CSO engagement has potential to influence education sector policy, processes, and improve delivery. We have formal frameworks, mechanisms of engagement, enhance the quality of engagement and increase the chances of influence. Madam Officer here has just said we need a formal mechanism of engagement. You do not just start working from out there and then come and call the government. There is need to have a formalized kind of approach. Understanding the education service delivery value chain is also very important so that you know when to strategically engage. Building constructive civil society synergies is an enabler, and like I've said, we no longer pursue these confrontational kind of approaches. We like building synergies with authorities so that we are able to work together. There are important moderating factors that determine the quality of monitoring. Those ones are like capacity, civic engagement space, resources, and also access to information and data. We'll be looking at that further. Okay, I'm told that I should stop there, and I will stop because the moderator is my boss at the moment. So what I will do is that I will refer you to the main paper with the organizers. It is quite detailed, and you will be able to read further. I'm sorry that we didn't have enough time to discuss this, but I hope we'll be able to engage further even on that. Thank you.
You wish to have more time to speak this during the year, because my next will be the question and answer session. And the paper is quite extensive. We have heard quite a number of issues that are trying for the cooperation between the public sector and the non-public sector, which is the CSO. We also learned about the case studies that happened in Kenya, Uganda, and Zambia, and in the Somalia thing on the countries, the issues of COVID-19, which is part of the subject that we heard earlier today. And I think it will continue throughout the sessions because it's something that we are all learning from. And I think the key issues that we need to look at mostly is the CSOs are holding the government's accountable. they're holding the politicians accountable. Yet, how do we make it happen for the mandates to take place? How do we access the funds through the CSOs? We see that there is free education and compulsory education for primary school, education that is available for secondary school. It must be available in every place and in every country. That is the SDG 4 strategy for 2030. Yet at the same time, we're asking, how can civil society hold governments accountable in fulfilling these obligations? We only have 9 years to go to fulfill the SDG 4. We're looking at another aspect of the fact that independent civil society organizations need to review and monitor government commitments and compare with the reality on the ground. That is, we're talking about the shortfalls that are there within the government, and also the governments have committed themselves to do what children are experiencing and what they need to do in their place of learning. So we're asking ourselves, in some countries, we are seeing there is a situation whereby the shrinking of civic space, we can call it civic space, is not that friendly. How can CSOs remain relevant, and how can they affect the achievements that they have put forward within their mandate? There's also another aspect that we're looking at, and this is based on your presentation here today. We're talking about monitoring and evaluation, monitoring the government. But we're asking ourselves, in addition to monitoring this government, civil society needs to report out what we find. It's not about just observing, but where do we report the findings? Where can we access those findings? And we're talking about also feedback. So the findings need to be reported, also we need to collect the feedback and share the feedback. And we're saying that we provide the feedback, but also is the public using that information in order to mobilize and hold their governments to account? And how can civil society organizations take so objectively without upsetting the government? Just mentioned that civil society has to be a friend of the government, but at the same time, we know that civil society organizations were born way back before our era, many years. Years before Christ, in the other era, and to date, that is over 2,000 years, the history of civil society is still relevant, and they still have the same function to hold. So, how can they work with the government and yet not upset the government? And finally, we're looking at to better hold governments and other actors to account and secure justice to those excluded from education. Civil society organizations should strive for better coordination and partnership across disciplines. And in your view, how can development partners participate in such activities? And how can they facilitate regional partnership in such? So these are the 4 key issues that I'm throwing to you, but I'm also throwing to the room. And because time is no longer our friend, I will first invite, maybe if there are any hands, or those who would like to ask questions before I go back to you. Thank you. I've seen one hand, 2 hands, 3, 4 hands, 5 hands. I'll take it. Should I be brave and take 4 hands? I'll start with you.
Thank you, and really a wonderful and insightful paper, which I would very much love to read the details of it, but this is really a very insightful paper. My question really is around becoming a critical friend. And you see, this requires mutual understanding of what exactly critical friend is, because often being a friend means there is not that level of critical, engagement. You become a little more less critical as you become more friendly to the government machinery. And there has been a lot of evidence we have. I have engaged in the past, particularly on the pets across the different sectors, where the moment that friendship is developed, it reaches a point when there's actually no criticism anymore, and therefore the civil society that was engaged in trying to bring about accountability becomes completely inefficient. And so how do you bring about this critical friendship between the civil society and the government machine? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've seen another question on that side. No, there is a question. I think the person changed their mind. Yes, Karim, you were listening.
Thank you very much, and I also concur with my colleague. Thank you, Dr. Somalia, for this enlightening presentation. I wish I had.
He's yet to be a doctor.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm really wondering how, I think it's a follow-up on what the gentleman asked back there. How do you balance between being misunderstood and actually mutually misunderstood? You can be misunderstood by the government that you are critical, you are monitoring, you are holding accountable, but you could also be misunderstood by the people for whom you are standing up. So how do you balance that? And how do you work on not being misunderstood? Because when you are misunderstood, then your message is going to be berated. You kill the messenger in order to berate the message. And I think for us, I'm coming from the academic institution, we can always have this freedom, academic freedom. So I can use my academic freedom. I will be less misunderstood because they know that's what academics do. But when you are civil society, you are activist, it is easier for you to be labeled that somebody is using you to challenge the authority. So I know, I mean, I don't really want to step into your shoes because I can see the risk of being misunderstood, and what do you advise the people that we have here to build their capacity so that they can balance that event of not being misunderstood?
Thank you. Thank you. Please don't raise a hand if you did not raise in the first place. Only the first four that I said I will pick up, please raise. Yes, please. Yes. The lady at the back. The lady at the back, and then
thank you. I think it's on the same line of
yes. Sorry, I'm sorry. Due to the time constraints, I would really appreciate if we can ask short questions and if it's a new question. If it's a continuation of the same issue, I would rather skip and go to the next question. So you only have 30 seconds, because time is not on us.
All right. It's on the same line of being a critical friend, but I want to connect it to the evidence and the issue of data. I think it is coming up from the earlier presentation, even from the chief guest. And I think looking at it, and especially the point that was actually raised by Dr. Ellen on, the shrinking of civic space and stuff like that. But I think probably how can civil society, I think that's the question, how can civil society engage in government in a way that the government can be more facilitators and supporters of evidence generation and data generation rather than regulators? As now, we have a number of, the laws and acts that are in place that actually prohibit that accountability and evidence and information gathering.
Thank you very much. The next one, please, 30 seconds only.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, my brother there. My question question is, because we've done some assessment from different countries, how do you rate the compliance of CSOs to the government related to the laws? Because in our country, you already alert that once you have a project, you want to engage the Ministry of Education, and then the law says that you will need to comply with the Ministry of Health and the Community Development, PRORAC, and so forth.
Back to you, and I think some of the questions can be
Yeah.
addressed.
Yeah, actually, I see just like 2 or 3 questions. Yeah, just going straight. Yeah, thank you very much for your questions. And like I said in the beginning, this is just to excite our discussion. I am not an owner of this knowledge. It is that I'm sharing so that we all discuss. Being a critical friend can be enhanced if you are engaging in a structured kind of manner. You do not do ad hoc kind of engagements, but you institutionalize processes within which you're engaging the government with. So, for example, we've heard of an MOU, we've heard of TOR, terms of reference. If the engagement is structured, then chances of being lost or swallowed up are minimal. Of course, we know there are civil societies that have gotten into this, it's called clientelism, where they have been sucked up into bureaucracies or political processes, and they have become now agents of that bureaucracy instead of fighting for that. So engage in a structured manner with instruments of institutionalization and managing the process. Evidence generation, how we can improve. Yeah, studies have shown that when civil society works with respective government departments to undertake joint data collection, it works better than when each one of them works independently. Why? When, of course, we know in the public service sector, there could be some inefficiencies, probably because of systemic or structural or policy kind of complications. And then the civil society will bring in this kind of expertise, but also for acceptance and ownership of the data and evidence that is produced by government. So if you do joint projects, then you'll be able to validate and work together. In terms of compliance and civic engagement spaces in different countries, I would like to say that different countries have different rules of engagement. There is no one rule about it. So different jurisdictions based on their political economics and their historical backgrounds have got different civic engagement spaces. You will find socialist, communist political economies have less space for civil society than liberal democracies. So basically, this is not one size fits all. It is specific to different countries, and we can do further in case studies if you want.
Thank you, moderator. Teresa, yeah, thank you for having a wider experience sharing with other countries. But in most cases, we have also similar studies. Even those countries can learn from us, especially when it comes to pets. We have what we do for that space. Even NGO integration with government through our council, which is known as the Congo. We work together in the integral area. Monitoring the evaluation and then we do work with the government, especially during and after exit of the program. Because for us, our projects, it's donor time frame. So at the end, we do have, even in the beginning, but I should say the gap is, there is a very big gap, I think, because the commission is here and the ministry is here. It's the arrow coming from the government now to the NGO, that's weak. But the arrow which goes to the, talked about engagement and reporting and working together, otherwise you cannot work in anywhere without using the people. It's belong to the government. But when it comes from the government now,
come to the arrow to us in area of engagement, especially when we are doing planning. We are not able to, that's what you are saying. So in case when we want to start again, can we have both arrows if we report and the government should do the same? I will give you an example. When we had this COVID, we have been working, but then we were working through projects. We did also work with TIE, but through international organization. But the government now, when they were putting lessons, what I was saying, the session through media, we were not engaged. And there was also an area of the school building program. It was not understood before, but we, in the guideline, which came that we should explain to the communities. We are not saying free education, we are saying I'm not touching, but then NGOs we are excluded. So there was a numerous names who were capable, I mean, who got legally to talk about it in the communities, but not us. Forgetting that all the training programs are good to us. But the last thing I should say, even in here, just having a photo with our president, the angels have been put aside. We are working, 10 is working in 8 zones. It should be even 8 members and presenting. So, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Some questions are not related to this. Yeah, I'm sorry that I tabled it. Another question? It has to be a question and it has to be related to the job. Otherwise, I will tell you. Yes, you can come in. I appreciate it.
All right. So, comment on the presentation. One is in the presentation, you have been talking about the philosophy of education in Africa that still integrates the aspect of the colonial legacy. And you say it in terms of data education center plans development should be a bit broad and should be very conservative. So here my comment is that we need to be very careful with that as well. Engage in that consultative process. Otherwise, there could be chances of African countries going into the same fate of having center plans reflecting the same colonial legacy. But the second last is on the this critical friendship between CSO and the government. So for me, it's just an advice. In these discussions we are having, I think this is a skill that can relate amongst ourselves. It's CSO and the NGOs. How best we can interact with the government? How best can we criticize the government? How best can we create a synergy with what we are doing at the government? So I think it's a learning skill that we can always in these sessions discuss and air out whatever challenges we have and what is the best, what is the better way is we regard the context of a particular country. So I think we can do this and improve our practice. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Yeah, my name is Mwalimu Mesha Korea. I'm professional teacher. Also, it's your Yami oral presentation. So I'm very interested with our leaders here. Doctor from the ministry, call me Dr. Commissioner. I'm very interested. It's very open. Wamba, if you have any problem with any issues concerning the education, consult his office. So, as the presenter said there, that let us share together the ideas and how we can work together with the government. So we need the friendly environment. So if everyone knows his or her duties and responsibilities, I think that there should not any collision with the what? With the government. But we have to know which authorities is concerning with what and who is there, so that we can see them together to solve our own problems.
For example, in the past, you can do something. Someone can say that there is only one, kwamba kuna mtu ambaye ni msemaji mkuu katika hilo. I'm just giving advice, no swear. Yeah, so in shortly, so we are supposed to work with the government in a friendly arena together, and we can discuss together. If there is any problem, Commissioner said that, come to my office, let us discuss. I think that's the best way that we can do, because the door of the rooms now is open to all of us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. This one first.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Mustafa Isabuta from Reinventing Shinyanga. The question might be not directly to the presenter, but anyone who might be giving the answers. I was just thinking of.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We are having a session on CSOs. If it is not presented to us, I cannot ask the public to set up the school. So if your question is not directly involving the center itself or the area of the topic, on the role of civil society organizations in public education sector, I'll press the school in the school.
Okay, thank you. Because I was having two questions, let me ask one of the questions which I might. Yes. Yeah. My question is to the presenter whom I have found very interesting issues on how to improve the education system in Africa, particularly for our context. Is there any system thinking that could actually look on how we can Africanize the education curriculum rather than complaining on having some colonial elements?
Thank you. I think,
Yeah, thank you for the second round of comments and questions. I'll start with the last one. Basically, what gives education relevance in any society is the foundations on which it is based. So if you want to make it relevant for Africa, go back to the foundations on which the current education system or the curricula that taught in Africa are based on. There are various underlying determinants. There could be knowledge needs, there could be social, cultural, and political needs, there could be philosophical needs. So there are a number of foundations. So, and I know every society, they sit down and look inward themselves, what are their learning needs? That is where they will get the foundation on which their education will be, and it will be relevant. But if it is built on foundations of other societies, then at one point you will find that it will not be relevant. Yeah, the other point was, the others were comments, that the other point that I thought required some response is about how best can we work with government. Experience has shown that structured and formal engagement delivers much more meaningful results and progress than when it is unstructured and informal. So the civil society, like I say, should not act like they are on the other side shouting at government. They should come together, discuss, and build a formal working relationship where, of course, none of them is allowing to be compromised, but it is out of mutual respect and general interest of the society. So the best way we can work with government and civil society is pursuing structured and formal processes of education. That's what I can say. And probably wrapping it up, I'll take it back to the moderator. I think we need to appreciate that there are strategies and approaches that exist that can enhance our role. And there are factors that we need to take care of for us to be able to perform our work better. Those are things to do with capacity. If our capacity is wanting, then we may not be both institutional and the technical capacity of individuals working within the civil society. And of course, there are issues to do with the resources that are available and the information and data access. So that's what I can say for now. But this, like the moderator was saying, this is just the beginning of our discussion. We can continue discussing online even after the workshop, and we can continue sharing. Thank you.
Back to when the Excellency, former President the big nation on financing. Financing is important, and here we are discussing financing CSOs. And yet, from my discussion, I could hear very clearly that it is very, very true what he says. In order to create finances and to be able to receive finances and to invest those finances, we need to have our systems. We need to have our structures. And if we don't keep our systems in the proper manner, we will never achieve good results. So I'm concluding that this session today brought us back to the thinking of the issue, because most questions raised here today came back to the same core issue. How can we work together? The CSO on one side and the government on the other side. And the answer is the systems. Structured systems, old processes, excellent relationship. Only then we will be able to achieve our results and to be able to seek the funds, invest the funds, and make sure that those funds are also traced throughout the expenditure. So if we don't sort our systems right, if we don't have an up and down approach, we heard about issues of government relationship. So the communication from CSOs to the government and back from the government to the CSOs is key. But then we need to have a plan. Sit together, have a communication, move forward. And finally, we're talking about monitoring, sharing the experiences, sharing the information that comes from the monitoring, and make use of that information. And I conclude that going forward, we today have achieved that because we heard the Commissioner for Education saying, my doors are open. So let us embrace that. And let us this session, I'm ending on a positive note that we have established a relationship between the CSOs and the government. And let us go forward and say, here we are, here you are, here we are together. Let us move forward. Thank you.
That was very powerful. Round of applause once again. A very capable chair and also a very efficient and very knowledgeable moderator, then things will just definitely go right. So we agree, right, that we finalize with the last one and then we go pack our dinner. All right. Instead of fighting with traffic. A bad idea. So we move on to our last session of the day. Raising quality education and strengthening equity, why governance in education matters. And we are pleased to call the chair of the session, Zaida Gala, Executive Director of WESO, Tanzania, with your hands, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, for this particular session, we had word that one of the participant number 2 would not be able to attend, unfortunately. And we had one particular, I believe it was online, and we've had difficulties with that. The PS was called out of the meeting. As you know, the appointments are going on, and he was somehow involved in a certain way. And we're going to call on Mr. Richard Olong, who is here, and I believe from UNICEF. From UNICEF, we are trying to call him back into the hall. I think he was engaging with a certain meeting. So let's begin with Richard. And if he's joined by the rep from UNICEF, then we'll continue. But this gives us an opportunity for all of us to interact with the main theme, even though the panel is diminished. We value very much your previous contribution. So now you have the floor. more to yourself. I believe this will be an interesting opportunity for you. Tupe nguvu mwenyekiti wetu, you're a diminished panel, but a diminished panel in numbers does not mean diminishing intellect. So there. All right, carry it away. Take us there.
Thank you. Thank you, MC, for expressing some challenges we are facing. We had expected to have 4 panelists, but some have involved from other agencies, and one was to participate online and is having difficulties. So we think that we have a replacement of the deputy PS, and now the commissioner again. So he has already introduced himself when he was in the other session, and I will take this opportunity to introduce Richard. Richard Olong is a regional program manager from Oxfam Audits in East and Southern Africa, and he has the best experience in education, finance, and governance. And he's from Uganda, from the head office in Kampala. And we were also expecting to have Dr. Daniel Baheta, the Chief of Education in Tanzania. He's not around at the moment, so when he comes, I will introduce him. So without wasting time, we will start our panel discussion. And the main theme for this session, as you can see from the program, is raising quality education and strengthening equity. But we are asking one main question: why governance in education matters? And we have several issues to discuss under this main theme. We'll look at the connectedness of the 3 main things which have been mentioned in this theme of the session. And if you look at it, we have quality education, we have equity, and governance. These are very key and big concepts in the education sector, and especially when we look at the performance to achieve the desired results. So I would like to start the questions with Richard. We have been talking about finances this morning, and now we want to see how the 3 elements which I have mentioned are connected, and also connecting them to inequalities. Because when you talk about equity, it also brings in the issue of inequality in education in different areas. So, Richard, how can these 3 elements assist in reducing inequalities in education and work as a catalyst for development?
Thank you, Chair. The general substitute. Thank you. I want to begin by saying 2 things. One is that education is a fundamental, and that's why it's a fundamental.
Sorry, can we have silence in the room, please? We cannot follow the speakers. There is voice somewhere. Can we ask them to move away from the room? I cannot concentrate. I am really sorry. Please.
Thank you for that. So I was saying that education is a fundamental right, and it's a basic human right that enables and paves way for us to be able to access and enjoy That's the part. second point I want to make is that education has two parameters. It can either be oppressive or it can be liberating. When education is liberating, it means it is transformative and transform our lives. And that is the line of education, which is of a quality nature that we need to pursue. That we want to have transformative education. And that transformative education enables our children to, one, begin to understand their rights, but also secondly, they begin to develop an aspect of critical thinking. Now, when our children or our citizens begin to develop the aspect of critical thinking and understand their rights, then they can be able to challenge certain norms in society and certain injustices in society. But also secondly, it can enable them then to begin to question the provision of services by government, by duty bearers. So the connection between transformative education and governance is that transformative education is able to build civically competent society, civically competent citizens who are able then to hold duty bearers accountable for the delivery of public services, including education. So that is important. So you have a cyclical kind of relationship between transformative education, a civically competent citizenry, and an accountable governance. Because by a civically competent society or citizens holding duty bearers or governments to account, makes the government be able to give us or deliver very quality education. So that's how I look at, the relationship between governance, education, and our society as a whole. In terms of fighting inequality and sustaining development, we all agree that education enhances our ability, our capacity to be able to engage in productive enterprise. In fact, studies show that 1 year of study or one year of education enables you to increase your chances of improving your earnings by about 10%. So that means for every year that you spend in school, you are able to enhance your ability and capacity to improve your earnings. And when you improve your earning, you are able to rise from some level to another level. Therefore, ensuring that the gap between the haves and haves not can also be narrowed. So if we look at that, it means that we need then to focus our attention and energies on delivering a quality education to our children so that they are able to enhance their ability and their capacity to be able to get more money. In terms of women or girls for that matter, we see that if girls receive the same amount or same quality of education as men do, because I think there are women up to this year, you all know that there is a lot of inequality in terms of education between men and women, between boys and girls. But studies also suggest that if we allow our girls to be able to access the same level of education as the boys, we are able to improve our GDP by about $90 million in a year. So that means there is a huge potential in quality education, not only for everyone, but also to uplift the standard of living for the poor girl and the vulnerable girl child in our society. So both politically and economically, education plays a pivotal role in balancing the act, so to speak, between the haves and haves not, and also enabling that we have an accountable governance able to give or deliver to us a quality education and a quality public service generally.
Thank you very much, Richard. And I would like to move now to Professor, where we would like to look more on the education policy and in relation to governance as well. So my question is, how can government strengthen policy commitments to ensure provision of quality and equitable education for all children? And I would like you to discuss this, focusing on learning environment, teacher recruitment, and allocation, but also issues of school curriculum, and also the very critical area of learning outcomes.
Thank you very much, moderator. Let me start by saying that the main driver of everything in the education sector is political will. Political will. Once you have a regime which embraces and which considers education as top priority for development, then everything will run quite smoothly. Well, that is according to research. For example, when you have a regime that thinks and believes that early childhood is an important step that lays a strong foundation for future learning and the overall participation in the socio-economic life, you can expect having wonderful progress in that particular area. When you have a regime that believes strongly that all vulnerable kids must have access to equal access to quality education, then you can expect wonderful projects on the ground targeted to enhance, to facilitate that vision. But when you have a regime that does not support that one, you will have problems. Even CSO's engagement will have problems. I'm glad that we have a very positive political will in Tanzania, which has created an enabling environment for us to discharge our duties confidently and comfortably. That said, if we have that context now, we are now free in terms of planning for educational programs that target specific groups of children. For example, children residing in rural areas have now access to it. Those who stay in very remote areas have now an opportunity to access education through what we call vituo shikizi vya shule, satellite schools. So there's no single kid who will be left behind simply because he or she resides in a very remote area. We have vituo shikizi vya shule, satellite schools. Likewise, there is no kid who will be left behind on the basis of being for having learning disability. No. We are very active and aggressive in that particular area. We have a department, the ministry, which is very serious in that particular area. And you have very impressive data. I hinted for the same when I was in the first session. So there's no problem at all. When you go to girls' education, again, there's no problem. You have heard that the current president is very serious with provision of quality education to girls in Tanzania. And we are working together towards that end to make sure that no single girl will be left in terms of accessing quality education. So when we talk about policy, the question says, what should be done? The same applies to policy development. A facilitative policy will only exist in a facilitative political environment. Fortunately now, we are very much supported when it comes to policy development, and the government has pronounced that we are going to embark on a serious review of our policy and of our curriculum. And we look forward to engaging every stakeholder in that process. So I am sure at the end, we are going to have a very good policy. So at this time, we are going to have a very good, we have started with hard hearing. A few weeks ago, we had a very, very impressive workshop, and we received a booklet with recommendations. We have taken them back to the ministry, and we are working on those as a starting point. And we will also extend. We want everybody, as I say, to participate in that process, so that we have a policy that reflects actual needs in the country. That is our intention. We need every idea that is in you be reflected, be considered for enhancement of quality in the country. So when you go to curriculum again, you have heard the president saying that we must review our curriculum, and you have started already. We will also engage everybody as a family. We work together to make sure that we review our curriculum in order to
technology is the way to go. Even when COVID goes away, I do not think that the embracing of technology that schools, ministries, and governments have done will go away. Probably it's going to even increase. And so for teachers to be able to deliver, they must, in my humble view, be able to acquaint themselves and embrace technology going forward. Finally, for me, I think that teaching should be a passion. Teaching should not be a last resort kind of thing. And so if you find a teacher with the true values and passion for teaching, you get the best out of that teaching. That's why in some countries, the level of education is going down because in a country that I know, which I'm not going to mention the name, for fear that I might be arrested. But of course not Tanzania. There is the belief that if you start your O levels and you do not pass very well, your destination is teaching. I don't know if it happens here, but in a country that I know of, if you do not get first grade, second grade, and you get third, fourth grade, you go to teacher training college. That, in my humble view, is degrading the importance of teachers in the development of our country. Because then you do not get the cream that you need to develop the institution of education in the country. I think government should be able to do something about this, whether by way of motivation, so that if I got first grade, I would be motivated to go for a teacher training college because there is something I get out. But it becomes a last resort kind of profession because people have downgraded teaching to some level. I think it is important for us to begin thinking as governments and as stakeholders in education on how we make it teaching or teachers as an appealing profession. Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. You are not a teacher, but you are speaking like you have more than 10 years in teaching experience. And I would like to invite Professor from the government to also comment on this, but I would like also to add, I know you have something to comment on what Richard has said, but also comment if there are any challenges in supporting teachers in the aspect of continual professional development, but also in access to technology, which Richard has mentioned.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Let me build on the last point made by my colleague there, that teaching is a passion, but teaching requires a spirit of affection. Studies in cognitive affective learning have established that students taught by teachers they admire are inclined, are more positioned to perform best in the academics than if they are taught by teachers they don't admire. So even if you have the passion for teaching, make sure that you create a teaching learning climate that is enabling, that is warm, that has warm social moral atmosphere for students to engage meaningfully in the teaching learning process. Studies have shown that if a student, for example, took notes from one he or she admired, that student will spend more time reading the notes to prepare from that teacher than if a student took the notes from a teacher he or she does not admire. So I think that's a fact. A good teacher should strive to be magnetic. When you have a class, and if you are affectionate,
you cannot expect a student missing your lesson. Students will be flocking from all directions, running, so that they don't miss your class. But if you find that during your session, you have very few students in the classroom, you are problematic. You are not a good teacher. And you are likely to end up having problems. If you go to university class, for example, you find a lecturer threatening, intimidating students. I am starting with 200 students here, but I'm sure at the end, half of you should go. That is not teaching. That's not teaching. You must attract students. You must be magnetic. Students flocking, following you. Please, sir, I have a problem. You intervene into the situation. You go like that. You may ask students whom I used to teach at the university. Almost all students sailed through smoothly. No problem at all. So for me, if you really have love and passion, that is very, very important. It is actually more important than having state-of-the-art lab, than having sports grounds that are well equipped, than having state-of-the-art infrastructure, than having state-of-the-art library. You may have all those, but a key factor is the teacher. Yes. The way you dress, the way you move, mannerisms, the way you express issues in the classroom should be impressive, such that students will actually remember even without reading the notes time now and again. So that is the point that I want to add. We must create a warm social moral environment that attracts students to engage in the teaching learning session very, very effectively. And then your question was, I should talk about the challenges.
Yeah, it's the challenges on teacher professional development, but also in accessing technology.
Finance, again. The main challenge, finances. Technology, finances. In-service teacher training programs, finances. You may have a very good policy for it, but we don't have funds. How can you do that? For example, currently we have a very good document about in-service training, and it is about school-based continuous professional development. This time around, we have changed our perspective. Instead of taking teachers away from schools to a teacher's college for a year, this time we are having an arrangement at school level that will engage teachers meaningfully in the teaching and learning sessions. And we are also reviving teacher resource centers across the country. There are more than 1,000. We have started rebuilding them, refurbishing them so that they are utilized alongside schools to ensure that teachers have opportunity to actually update their knowledge. In the future, there will be no problem because we have now a document on that will guide our action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for touching the issue of passion for teachers, that they need to become like a magnet to attract the children. And I hope from the participant we'll be able to discuss further on that, because sorry.
Sorry, Maria.
Yeah, sorry.
I forgot one point which I included in one of my papers, and I said, if you are a teacher, remember this statement: we will know nothing until we know that others know something, and perhaps better than we do. We will know nothing. Completely, we will know nothing until we know that others know something, and perhaps better than we do.
And we are ready to learn from them. So thank you for that very nice and interesting point, and we'll discuss further. So I would like to give the floor space to ask questions. You're welcome. So yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Mr. Edward Majura. I'm working with Child Support Tanzania. We are implementing inclusive education there. We have a few challenges in implementing inclusive education, including lack of issue of accessibility. What's the government's plan exactly from your Ministry of Education? What's the plan to improve accessibility? And also, do you, on the issue of in-service training teacher, some of our organizations, including our Church Support Tanzania, we regularly conduct training for teachers to capacitate them on the issue of inclusive teaching and inclusive classroom. So do government acknowledge such training as a way to facilitate teachers' knowledge of inclusive education? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over there, behind, lady, madam. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Lilian, and I would like to you. You know what is Swahili, and I hope you understand. I have only one question, but I'm touched by what the commissioner has said. And by the commissioner is like college. We have large classes, no matter how much understand. And to the CSO, now that we are supporting the government, it is an emergency. The way we are moving, so we have started having that classes before 2015. That's why this is an emergency, and we need to do something about it. Government in a strategy gani ya make sure kwamba tuna cope na hizi large classrooms, kwa sababu tunazo shule kubwa zinaweza kama 600 lakini walimu ni wawili. Hapa Dar es Salaam tuna Vingunguti tu, the classroom was 240 teachers, lakini the teachers are the same, the classrooms are the same, the buildings are the same. What the government did was to divide the classrooms. Shule ziwe mbili, maana watoto walikuwa 800. So what is the emergency strategy? Because the way we are moving, we cannot ignore kwamba walimu wanashindwa kufundisha watoto 200 kwa darasa. I agree, you said this morning kwamba the process kuwa na watoto wengi enrolled in school, it is the process ya kwenda kuovercome care qualification. Fine, it will take time, but it's present. It tunafanya hivi angalau hao watoto wasitoke kama huko darasa. Huyu mwalimu hazina shule, amefundishwa kufundisha watoto 45. Anaondoka anatoka shuleni, anakuta 250. Dr. Rali anasema shule za private walimu wanapigia simu wazazi, wanatoka kupigia simu kwenye bidhaa. Kwa 35. Sasa 210 yoga space mwalimu huyu. Tusimkompare mwalimu wa private na mwalimu wa shule ya public. Yaani hatuwafanyii haki yao. Tunaomba kujua government ina strategy gani? Tuambie government hata hii miaka mingine 4 inayokuja hii tunamsaidia huyu mwalimu na hili darasa lake kubwa, kwa sababu vijana wetu wanazaa na wanazaa kweli na watoto wanaenda shule.
Asante sana. Thank you very much. This side far at the back. Yes.
Thank you very much.
This side, yeah.
Yes, my name is Rahman, and I think I want to comment on what the commissioner has said about the policy statement, because that will inform the strategy and implementation strategy. But we all know policies are not legally binding or legally enforceable. And we use a lot of resources actually make policies, and we have been champions, especially CFOs, in pushing for policy validation, better policy coordination, but at the end of the day, we have seen a number of policies in the countries that do not have an implementation strategy, do not have a review. There is no way that we can make that legally binding. So I think one of the conversations or discussions that we should have, how can we ensure that the policies that we are making, using a lot of resources, can be legally binding and enforceable in the country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. What this side at the end.
Thank you for the presentation. I have 3 quick questions and including comments. One is on the idea of transformative education in relation to governance. So trying to conceptualize governance, I was thinking perhaps we should be thinking towards more of a transformative leadership in relation to transformative education rather than just the governance. Because transformative leadership allows for creating that enabling environment for the education ecosystem to adapt and change according to the situations that are changing and respond to the needs that are evolving in the law. So your comments about is it governance or really transformative leadership that is needed to transform education into what in the future is in demand for? And the second is in relation to the policy, and I'm happy that the government currently is reviewing the policy. And we know from history that it has always been mostly in response to the crisis that has already evolved in the education system. Can we move from that into more of a thinking to prevent a crisis that might likely happen in the next 10 to 20 years in the education system? That thinking helps us anticipate the changes that are happening in the world and help us develop mechanisms in which, when those issues come, they will find us prepared. Instead of right now, when we are preparing a policy to respond to the crisis that already is engulfing the education and its outcome. The last thing is on the tuition. One of the things that we have done recently in our education portfolio as the American Foundation is support the government in establishing satellite centers in southern Tanzania. Most often, these satellite centers are located in very rural, remote, and very poor communities. And often, it involves bringing together communities to try establish classrooms and contribute for monthly allowances for the teachers who are mostly volunteers, and then try to provide meals and so on and so on. Owing to the poverty levels in these places, they usually have not been able to meet the required standards by the government for these satellite centers to be registered or officially recognized and therefore be integrated into the education ecosystem. Could you, Commissioner, help us in trying to create a special arrangement in which these satellite centers become recognized and the teachers, the volunteer teachers being supported, and even the government supporting these centers to meet the required standards, or perhaps minimizing the required standards for them to be easily integrated into the education system? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I would like to stop the question session there and give space for our panelists to respond. And I would like to start with the
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Let me start with the last question, satellite centers. Usually, when a center reaches a stage of changing into an actual school, a report should be written by our quality assurance officers and then sent to our office for scrutiny. And we have registered a number of satellite centers as schools now. So the process is, if you find that a certain center has reached a certain stage that qualifies it to be a school, just write a report to us, and then we accredit that one as a school. And usually that center is saved by teachers from the mother school, which is located at a distance. So they go there, so they are paid, they are on the payroll. I don't know if you have, maybe, I don't think that you just pick people randomly from that community to teach, I don't think. So we have those teachers who come from the mother school, which is located at a distance. And they go there, they teach, and they're paid for that. So if you have such centers in your location, and you think that they need to be registered as schools, primary schools, please just submit your request for that. Policy should be prepared in such a way, that policies should be prepared in such a way that they are proactive and not reactive. That was that question. I think we are now at the right time. We say we are now embarking on serious policy review. And because you are part of the parcel of the process, that idea should come up when we start reviewing the policy. Because policies should be proactive, not reactive, should not respond to crisis. No, they should prevent crisis. So I think that point will be taken on board when we review the policy. Another issue was on policy implementation. Policies may be beautiful, but not implementable. Usually, if a policy fails to be implemented, there is a rule to legislate it in order to enable implementation. And usually, policy implementation depends largely on the political will again. If the political will is not there, you can have a very, very good policy, but this implementation maybe nothing. I did a study in early childhood, policy practice dialectics, how policy is reflected in practice. So you find that you can have a very good policy, but what's on the ground is almost nothing. So political will should be there in order for policy to be implemented. And if you find that it's necessary to legislate, you legislate to make implementation compulsory, legal value. 2 large classrooms, we appreciate that one. We know teachers are facing problems with large classrooms, but we are struggling to provide our teachers with knowledge about how to teach large classes. Teaching large classes is a temporary measure, but more importantly, construction of new classrooms. You are aware that everywhere you find projects are going on. In every region, we have so many projects that are engaging in the process of construction of new classrooms. We have EP4R, GPE Lens 2, and other programs. And in the near future, we'll be having projects that focus primarily on early childhood education and the primary schools. So I think, and maybe I like to touch. If you go to Japan, an early childhood classroom is considered to be more prolific, more productive if it has as many kids as possible. In Japan, they consider large classes in early childhood as an opportunity for them to learn because it creates an avenue for kids to engage in conflict resolution strategies. So in other contexts, the many kids that you have in a classroom is actually an opportunity for you. And once they fall into conflict, the adult does not intervene directly, you just watch. For kids themselves to find solution to conflicts. So what I'm trying to communicate here is, in the other contexts, the more kids you have in the classroom, the better. You understand? The East versus the West. In the Western part, no. The smaller the class, the better. In Japan, the bigger the class early childhood, the better. So there's a contrast there, but we are striving to ensure that classrooms are kept to the minimum to enable that the interaction between teachers and students is actually productive. Finally, accessibility for special needs education. The government is doing all it can to ensure that kids with learning disabilities have opportunities to access quality education. I hinted on that in the first session. We are, for example, constructing state-of-the-art primary school for special needs education. Lukuledi, Paulina, where is Lukuledi located? Lukuledi, and the you are putting up. And you can also go to Patani and see the kind of school that we have, secondary school, state-of-the-art secondary school for special education. 640 students will be accommodated in that school, Patani secondary school for special needs education. And every school that's put up, you find that the infrastructure is quite friendly for students with special learning needs. I think that suffices, Madam Moderator, at the moment. So the government is working hard to ensure that children with special learning needs actually receive education of good quality, just like others. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. Over to you, Richard, for any comment.
I think there is only one point raised by my friend up there about transformative leadership. I do think that the concept of transformative leadership is a good one. And I do think that that is the direction in which most institutions, including governments, are going. That if we have transformative leaders, we then are able to improve our institutions going forward. However, that should be a discussion for another day. The discussion today, in my humble view, is about quality education, transformative education, vis-a-vis education governance. And that is why we are talking about how can education or transformative education, so to speak, lead to good governance in education. And that, for me, is the discussion for this evening. And that's why I dwell on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This session is very interesting. We have concluded the questioning session, but we're informed that our panelists were struggling to join online. So we'll see if we can give him some minutes. Boaz, are you there? Hello, Boaz.
Hello, I am there.
How are you?
I'm fine. I'm happy to join. I'm in Dakar, Senegal. Sorry, it has been difficult connecting, but I'm happy to be with you. Hongera, pongezi sana.
Thank you. Very sorry about that. My name is Zaida Mgala, the moderator for this session, and we were really looking forward to having you connected. Sorry about the challenges. And you can hear us very well. I would like to proceed and throw this question to you so that we can even benefit from the experience from ANSEFA. So Boaz is working with ANSEFA as regional coordinator, and we are glad to have him joining because we're almost closing the session. So I would really request the participants to be patient so that we can listen to Boaz. He's very far away and we understand the challenges of connection. So Boaz, education governance is not an abstract concept. It is something that affects the lives of parents, the school experience of children, and the performance of the teachers, and also the efficiency and equity of education provision. Now, you are working with ANSEFA and would like to learn from your experience and from the work that ANSEFA is doing. What lessons can we learn from education governance that have yielded positive outcomes?
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and all protocols observed. I'll go straight into responding to that question because I know, as you've indicated, time is against all of us. One, education governance is critical because when you talk governance, you're talking of how all the resources within the institution that renders or delivers quality, inclusive public education then are brought to bear so that the ultimate beneficiary, that is the child, really gets maximum benefit. And indeed, I think from what the moderator has told you, as ANSEFA, we are a continental network. And what we do is supporting the capacity development of our members and key stakeholders in education to ensure that when they deliver education, it is one, education of quality. Two, it is education that includes everyone, and everyone here includes those with disability, the marginalized categories, our girls, those in the nomadic communities, the fisher folk, and all that. So it is inclusive. And the equity aspect of it, so that when resources are also allocated, they are aligned to support where it's needed most. And because most of the regions, like in Tanzania, the United Republic of Tanzania is a unique one, very huge provinces and all that. So then you'll be looking at how do you ensure that the farthest to reach really are reached first, because that is the principle that even SDG 4 talks about, that you don't leave anyone behind. And so the equity principle becomes very, very important. And then I would also mention the fact that for that delivery, with all those critical stakeholders to be brought on board, that's where the leadership of the education sector, driven by the Ministry of Education and supported by the Ministry of Finance, are very critical. Why? Because they'll be able really to make reasonable judgment on what is good for education based on informed input, that is research and all that. So civil society like TENMET in Tanzania ably does that with the Haki Elimus and all that. And so in terms of then ensuring that you harness all that resourcefulness, I think that is where then the participation of all these stakeholders in the education governance become critical at various levels. I'll mention the first one at the planning stage, the planning level, the education sector planning and all that. And given that when I talk planning right now, you know the pandemic that is really attacking the entire world, COVID-19. It means that when you're planning, you include all the stakeholders so that different dimensions are now brought to bear. The dimension on health, because as we discuss education, you don't discuss it then in isolation. You realize that how water and sanitation, those the wash facilities are provided is critical. You realize that health becomes very, very critical component of this. And so when you bring these stakeholders, then definitely the governance becomes improved, becomes much better. And most significantly, I think the role that then the local leaders of the catchment area, for if I go to the school level within the administration, the local leaders are very critical in ensuring safety and security, because I wanted to bring the dimension of the safety and security in ensuring that what we do in delivering education then is really spot on. And you'd also still find the aspect where the parents themselves, the parental responsibility is significant, and that parental responsibility is harnessed right from home. So, and of course, through their own way of identifying representatives, their own way of identifying representatives. Excuse me? Yes, okay. Their own way of identifying representatives, they'll be able to understand that critically the role that they play in helping or supporting the learning in the school is critical. And so then you get to the school level, how the teachers then also get involved. So if you see, I'm trying to bring a picture of the multiplicity of actors to ensure that education governance really then comes to count. And you can't discuss education governance without getting into the education resources and accountability. And education resources here, there are quite a number, but I'll singly just point out on the financial resources and then the human resources that are the teachers. And the teachers within the teacher management framework, I'll also point at a few things. One is how you motivate the teachers so that the teacher in the classroom and the teacher within the school compound and the teacher within the environment or within the society is a teacher that helps to model the children or the learners to become fully developed people in the society of the 21st century as we speak of it. So then, and that teacher also helps to clarify more of the quality. And so the aspect that I'll be making is where then the teacher is involved in helping to refresh and reorient the curriculum to fit, because there are certain dimensions that may not have been anticipated before. But now, like Corona, for example, has come. Like in the countries across Africa where conflicts do flare up a number of times. So here is where then you look at how then the teacher is able to adjust and utilize various strategies to deliver quality education. But also, I think I mentioned the motivation, because a motivated teacher is part of the quality. And with that, you'll be able then to reap more benefits from it. On the financial resources and all that, I know Tanzania, like most of the countries where they've committed to ensure that at least 20% of the national budget is allocated to education. It would be important that that allocation is actually spent. It's disbursed in time to the departments, to the schools that require it. And it is disbursed without holes along the way. That's the corruption pitfalls are actually removed. In other words, the being accountable for every shilling, because it's Tanzania shilling, every shilling that then is made available to be implemented in education. And also, I think the aspect of constantly reviewing, because the costing of education at times, they are not all governments have done so. So, and we do encourage that as you cost, what would be the need of a learner? How much does it cost? So that costing element helps even to know how much would be sufficient or would be adequate to sustain learning in this particular area. And in this case, when costing, then there are different approaches, the gender-based budgeting and all that. Can't get to the details of it, but you get to understand who needs what more. And that how do you help in addressing that? So I think just because you said of the time, just walking through in a summary, I will be able to say that. Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Sorry for taking a lot more time.
Very much. And, I will request you to be attentive and see if you can hear the questions from the audience. I will allow 1 or 2 for us.
Thank you.
Only 2 sessions. Any question? And please use your mic and speak loudly so that you can capture the question. Yes, Karibu.
Asante. I'm Gunashan Marusu from Rebecca's, working on the sixth teachers training, building the capacity of teachers on the methodology of practice-based teaching. Basically, my concern is on, as Boaz has said, teachers are really key to quality education. But if I look at Tanzania teacher colleges, still the preparations of teachers is not that much adequate. Some of the teachers are really prepared half-book. And if you look at the medium of instruction in the teacher colleges is Swahili, but when they go to school, they are told to teach a subject including English. So they struggle. And that's why you find people finishing at standard 7, they don't know even how to explain themselves in English. And when they are told to go to secondary education, they are told to speak English. So that is really still hard, but English is taken as the last resort. It's just a letter on something which is being taught. For my yeah, for my training, I thought maybe it should be starting from the lower levels, like the nursery school levels, so that they can cope up with all the good languages. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Boaz, I think you can note that, but also take it as an observation for the government as well. See why that kind of mixing on languages. The language people are told is not the one they expected to use when they go to practice. The last question, who would like to get the last chance? Yes, madam. Yes.
I was the first, I thought to be the last, but that's the case. I have only one question, and that is regarding the teachers in general. Because before you joined, we were talking about the fact that teachers have to have the passion and the motivation. Colleges. Or give teachers the skills for mental health. Because if a teacher went through education system that was submissive or kind of abusive to them, they will end up being teachers with the wounds, carrying the luggage from the childhood. So how do we address the issues of mental health to help them progress into the next stage? That involves as well the kind of life or kind of work experience they face when they have to handle more than 150 children, like the capacity that they are not taught to handle, but they have to handle, including the difficult situation, because we find children from backgrounds that are different and they have to handle them for day-to-day activities. All that impacts on the teacher's capacity. So mental health, where does it come in? Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Boaz, over to you for any comment or responding to the question. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the delegates. Particularly, I think the first was observation on the teacher training. And indeed, teacher training, because knowing very well that when you have a teacher trained well, exposed to different treatments of handling curriculum and the learners, of course, in totality, that is part of what they learn. Then you'll be able to know what kind of adjustments to do, particularly when now it is dealing with the languages. But it is true that there are times when, of course, the training that you get in the colleges, when you get now to the very basic level, because basic then begins at the very early stage to the lower primary, upper primary, secondary, junior secondary, and then the high school. I think the kind of training should be able to equip these teachers to handle those and any adjustments that come your way. I'm Kenyan, so I would also be able to tell you, for example, the situation where we have teachers in Kenya trained to handle curriculum, which now is being changed. And so if then the training was not really done sufficiently, that adaptability or the being able to change then becomes more problematic. So I trust the teachers to be able really to adjust and adapt in such situations. So the teacher training curriculum, I think for whatever it takes, it should be a living process, in that the feedback from the field, from the schools and all that should continuously be utilized to improve the teacher training in terms of content, but even the duration. But there's also the continuous professional teacher development. I think that is an aspect that every country, most of the countries have picked this, and this helps them to develop top-notch teachers that can learn anywhere and actually teach. And for the East Africa community, I think we are talking of borderless countries, for instance. So when you're talking of borderless, it means that a teacher from Tanzania should be well prepared or equipped so that they can just, if they cross to Kigali, that has now changed their curriculum and come, they used to be more in the Francophone framework. Now it is Anglophone and all that. You should not find lots of difficulties really fitting in there. So the adaptability of the training that the teachers, teachers have should equip them for that. And I think finally, I think on the mental health, of course, the questioner did mention a number of issues around this, including how teachers then are made to handle large classes, you know, and large classes, but just look at the tools that the teacher is using, the schemes of work. You're there delivering the curriculum and you are giving assignments, you're marking papers, you are interacting with every child because each child is unique and you need to address them, you know, that kind of a personalized attention. So variously, in most of the basic education guidelines, I'll cite the Kenyan one, which would ordinarily help in providing what exactly is a requirement to support, sorry?
Thank you.
Yeah, the requirement then that would support a teacher in such circumstances, because the stress that they go through, you have a class size of 80 plus, and each and every day you are handling a number of subjects, say at the primary school level. You'd find then it reaches a point that teacher really is just glossing over the material, and because they just want to tick it. So the mental health of this teacher, refreshing them and enabling them really to indulge in games, or what are also indicated earlier, the sporting, in addition to the sporting activities, various ways of professional teacher development as they continue. That would be very, very critical for them. And I think most importantly also, we should also not overburden the teachers. I would directly appeal to our colleagues from the ministry, both finance and education, to ensure that they continue to train and recruit and deploy more teachers so that we meet the class size of 40 or 50. And of course, with Corona, I think the class sizes are now changing, because right now, the classes that used to be 40 or 50, you divide that, say, by 2, that's 25. So it means we require more teachers right now to deal with such numbers. So the ball is in the court of the Ministry of Finance, and the Education Ministry through the Policy and Planning Department should help find a solution that would fit the situation that we are in within the Corona pandemic, and for the 21st century really requirements in teaching and learning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Proud to Boaz, and I would like to declare that we have concluded the discussion and the contribution from our panelists. And in summary, we've all heard that governance really matters in promoting provision of quality education, but also ensuring that the inequality gap in learning and provision of resources is minimized. And we've heard also that where transformative leadership is practiced and good governance is practiced, for sure, our children, our young people will be equipped with the best skills that they need in their future, and that will enable and prepare them to participate in the competitive economy and increase their income and reduce the inequality gap. And that's where the governance plays a role in reducing inequality, but also for development of our young people, but the nation as well. There are also several questions in achieving that. How can our systems facilitate our citizens to be active and demand for quality education for their children, and in a way holding the education service providers accountable to ensure that children learn and they excel and thrive. But also, I'll go back to Professor's point of teaching is a passion. But then how can our government ensure that they recruit teachers with passion? Because currently, I think from our experience, talking to people, there are teachers who have been joined the teaching profession, not because they have the passion, but from other reasons like unemployment. So someone say, okay, let me just join the profession, but maybe they don't have the passion. So maybe that's something to look at. How can the recruitment of teachers ensure that we recruit teachers who love the profession and they are ready and they are competent to deliver? But also, Boaz has shared with us many good practices to promote good governance in the education system, and he talked a lot about stakeholders' involvement. And the most emphasis is that all key stakeholders and actors should be involved right at the beginning, at the planning stage, and not later, where their diverse ideas may not be accommodated on the national strategies or other plans. So I think that's a very good takeaway. But also on the issue of financing education and investment. There were several questions. In the morning, this was discussed as well, but how do we make sure that we invest better? Where do we invest our funds to achieve the desired results? Where do we invest our energy? Where do we invest our time? Because we can have a lot of money, a lot of funding, so we fundraise from various sources, but at the end of the day, maybe we are not investing properly in the areas where we can yield desired results. So those are the issues I think they are good takeaway from the session, and others which you also heard from the panelists. And I would like to thank you all for your good questions, very constructive questions, critical, challenging, but they help us reflect and think through how our education systems can be strengthened and how governance can be strengthened to contribute to raise the quality of education, but also to ensure that issues of equity are addressed. And at the end of the day, we achieve quality learning outcomes for our children to achieve the desired sustainable development goals, number 4, which the government has committed to achieve. I thank you very much, Richard, my dear panelists. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Boaz, for your participation, and I wish you all good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the space to moderate.
Thank you, and bye to all. Thanks to TELMET for organizing this.
Over to the organizers.
All right, that's been fantastic. You see, it was a lean table, and then suddenly the issues were rather big, weren't they? Congratulations, Chairperson, Zaida. Thank you very much, Boaz, for joining us. You truly gave us that international feel, and we wish you a good evening, whatever time it is there. Asante sana. Mr. Chola, anything from you? I need to take people to a very quick and early dinner.
Oh, yes. Good evening, each one of us. And I just want to thank you all for staying over. And apologies for the extension of time. Where I understand by now it would have been done. But due to circumstances during the morning session, we have extended some time. But also, let me take this opportunity to welcome you tomorrow. As early as possible. We shall be beginning at 9 o'clock sharp. And we have several sessions for those who are our program. We'll be having interesting and interactive sessions. So may I take this opportunity to urge you to come. And our first session will be the role of development partners. Today we are part of civil society's role, but also government role. But tomorrow we understand we are working in partnership. The government is working in partnership with the development partners they will be having that session. So mine are just a few that let's come tomorrow again. We still have 2 days to go. And I hope today has been very productive. And the information that we have gathered here, we could also share with the people who have not been here. But most important, I just want to thank the commissioner and his team for staying this long, but also for shedding light. Also for shedding light in the areas that we wanted to hear from the government perspective. Otherwise, I just want to wish you, I don't know, it's a brunch, a dinner, whatever it is, but make sure that you pass by. It is a paid dinner, so don't miss. And I hope hakuna anayefast. Au bado kuna mfungo sita. Yes. So yeah. Even if there is mfungo sita, I think it is time to break the fast. It is. For your calculation.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a good evening. I'm reading your comments on the app. Please use it at night, get to know it, and dump all your ideas in here. The coupons, through the door. Through the door. Jioni njema, Mungu awabariki sana, tukutane kesho, salama.
Salama kabisa. Na tuliokuwa tunafanya